Irish husband, he's clumsy in his ways. He loves to play frustrating video games, learning Portuguese, making cooking videos. It's my Irish husband, enjoy the show.
Hello, I'm Marcus and this is my Irish husband.
Hello, I'm Peter.
Hoje a gente vai fazer uma receita para começar o clima de Natal.
Biscoitinho e Cramberry ou laranja e para acompanhar o Mulled Wine. O Mulled Wine nada mais é que o vinho quente do Brasil. Aqui é super famoso também, principalmente nos dias mais frios.
Por falar nisso, o Peter vai falar um pouco sobre o solstício de inverno, que é uma outra celebração muito importante no calendário celta. Então, sem mais delongas, vamos começar a receita.
Primeiro é tudo, você vai colocar o cranberry e quarto de açúcar e misturar no processador. So it's coming up to Christmas, but just before Christmas, on the 21st of December, we have a very important Celtic festival, and it's called the winter solstice. And the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. This is because the sun in the northern hemisphere is the furthest away from the earth at that particular point of year. And we have a palace which commemorates the solstice here in Ireland. It's 5,000 years old, and you might know it as Newgrange. The old name for Newgrange is She in Broga, which means the palace of the brew. The brew is the area in which this particular palace is. Or She, which can also mean like the otherworldly palace or the otherworldly dwelling. So there is a passage inside Newgrange, and at that one particular time of year, which is the winter solstice, is the only time of year where the sun actually enters the passage. So at roughly maybe 7 AM on winter solstice morning on 21st of December, the sun beams into the passage for I think it's roughly 17 minutes, and it illuminates the entire passage, especially the carvings at the back of the passage. There's quite nice spiral carvings, old art which was done by our ancestors. And there's a little spiral inside the palace as well, a little triple spiral which illuminates up at this particular time of year. And after the 17 minutes are up, the sun retreats and it goes into darkness again. So it's amazing how accurate our ancestors were in building something like this. It shows that they studied the sun, the moon, the stars, and had great knowledge of astronomy. And they had great knowledge of building as well, because 5,000 years later it's still standing perfectly, and it's built completely perfectly. And the palace also represents like the womb of a woman, because the remains of dead people were placed in the palace, and at this time of year the sun would shine into the palace and take the soul of the dead person up to the sun god.
Agora a gente vai misturar os outros ingredientes em uma travessa. Então a gente vai colocar a farinha e a manteiga em cubos. E a gente vai misturar isso até formar uma areia de praia.
Depois disso, a gente coloca o cranberry, o restante do açúcar, as raspas de laranja, o extrato de amêndoa e colher de açúcar de laranja.
Agora a gente vai misturar bem até dar liga. Se você sentir que ainda está muito seco, você pode adicionar outra colher de suco de laranja, que vai ajudar a ficar mais úmido e dar liga na massa.
In mythology, Newgrange was owned by the chief god of Ireland, and his name was the Dagda, which means the good god. And the Dagda was a really big guy who liked his food and liked his worldly pleasures. So the Dagda had a son called Angus, and Angus wanted to borrow the palace, and he went up to his dad and said, I'd like to borrow the palace for one night and one day. So his dad agreed, and he went off maybe somewhere for a walk. And when his dad came back the next day, he says, okay, give me the palace back. And Angus says, oh no, I have it forever now. And he says, what do you mean? Because a night and a day actually lasts forever. Basically meaning that every day has a night and every day has daylight. So it's a bit of strange logic. So Angus became the new chief of the palace, and poor Dagda was now homeless. So Dagda had to find a new home, which she found down by the river Boyne. So to this day there's a small mound. It's not too far from Newgrange, and it's called the Dagda's Mound. So it's a small little house. Imagine if you had a big house and one of your family members is living in a little shed or caravan outside the house looking up at yours as you kick them out. So. But still, Angus was a much loved god, as he was like the Irish god of love, and he always helped lovers that were in trouble. And one particular set of lovers he helped was Diarmid and Grania. Grania was engaged to Fionn McCool, who was a legendary figure in Irish mythology.
Oh, we talked about Fionn McCool on the last video.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Oh, the brownie.
Yeah, we talked about Fionn McCool and the brownies. The Fionn basically stalked Diarmid and Grania because Grania ran off with Diarmid, and he chased them all over the country. And there's tombs throughout the country, all tombs which are known as Diarmid and Grania's bed, because they were said to have slept there that particular night. But Angus often hid Diarmid and Grania from Fionn. He was afraid of Fionn's wrath against the lovers. So he hid them and he protected them. But unfortunately Fionn caught up with them, and Diarmid ended up getting attacked and ripped open by a wild boar. Fionn refused to save him, but his men said, you better save him or else we'll abandon you. So Fionn tried to save him by giving him healing water. But unfortunately it was too late. Diarmid had died. So Fionn was distraught, but still he brought Grania back to his palace as his wife. And she lived a pretty miserable life under Fionn because she really loved Diarmid. So it's a bit of a sad story really. It's just poor girl ends up going with somebody she doesn't like, and she spends the rest of his life with him. So poor Angus, he didn't do a very good job of protecting him in the end, but that's life.
Agora que a mistura já está pronta, a gente vai colocar no plástico filme, fazer um rolinho, e aí agora que tá assim, ele vai para a geladeira por 2 horas.
12 segundos depois.
Agora vamos fazer o Mulled Wine. É super fácil. Essa receita de para 2 pessoas. Em uma panela você vai colocar o vinho, o pau de canela, o anis estrelado, cravo, as rodelas de laranja.
É mexerica, na verdade, isso, tá? Porque a gente não tinha laranja e colocou mexerica.
E para finalizar, o açúcar mascavo.
Agora a gente vai mexer por aproximadamente 8 minutos, até levantar a fervura, claro.
So the third part of the history is another mound which is close to Newgrange, which is not as famous, and this is called Dowd, which in Irish is Duad, which means darkness. And this is quite a fascinating mound because it's been left unexcavated and just as it is for the last 5,000 years. Although there was a botched excavation attempt in around the time of the famine, because people were looking for treasure inside it. They thought there was treasure in it because people were poor and starving.
E a gente também falou da potato flaming already na receita de baked potato.
So they found nothing in there because they thought there was a chamber in the middle, but there wasn't, and instead they just created a big hole on the top, just damaging it forever. But there are two chambers in Dowd, but one on the east and one on the west side, and both chambers are quite small and contain lots of megalithic art which was created by the ancestors, basically drawings in the stone. So on the summer solstice, when the sun is going down, the sun shines into the east entrance. And it's only when the sun is going down, when it's starting to go into darkness, the sun shines in, which is quite fascinating, really. But the reason why Dowd is mainly called darkness as well, there's another story of an old Irish king, and his name was Bresil, and he got the nickname Bresil Bo de Bod, which means Bresil without cattle, because at the time there was another famine. It was a great meat famine basically, and there was very little cows in Ireland. So Bresil, he wanted to appease the gods to try and end the cattle famine. So he invited all the men of Ireland to come and build a giant mound, which he wanted to build all the way up to heaven so he could see the gods. But to do this, he had to stop the sun so he could create like an extended daylight. So this daylight would last for many, many, many days. And his sister, who was a powerful magician, done this. So she managed to stop the sun in the sky. But as the men were building the mound, a lust fell upon Bresil, and the lust was for his own sister, so the two of them mated. This was seen as an abomination to the gods, and it ended up breaking the spell. Suddenly the sun dropped out of the sky and the whole mound went into darkness, and the men of Ireland just stopped their task and left and went home. And since then, the mound of Dowd has never grown any greater and has always remained in darkness. Well, until that time of year when the sun is going down, the passage is illuminated. You don't want this to oil because you lose all the alcohol.
Duas horas depois.
Agora que osco que já estão gelado,
Olá, verbos.
a gente corta aproximadamente 1 centímetro. Você pode deixar também no congelador por até 3 meses. Aí você vai besuntar a rodelinha de cookie no açúcar e põe na cadeira. E agora ele vai pro forno 160 graus por 12 minutos. Olha que belíssimo que ficou. Então, pessoal, é isso. Espero que vocês tenham gostado. Não se esqueçam de curtir, comentar, se inscrever no canal.
Compartilha com os amigos e a gente se vê no próximo vídeo.